Okay, it's midnight in Siberia. That means we have a webinar. Welcome everyone. Great to see joining our webinar from all around the world. It's my turn this time, and today we'll talk about COVID, and we will do an update on the webinar we did about a year ago. So February 2020, when the COVID-19 was just hitting the news big time and the disease was jumping from country to country, we looked at this situation and how Chinese government in particular tackled COVID-19. They introduced unprecedented lockdowns. We sat together with Dr. Anna Klassen. Hello, Anna. Here in Russia. And we thought, well, actually there is so much more than one can do, one should actually do in terms of dealing with this novel virus. And this is how this whole idea of starting this direction began. It was February 2020. So we did a webinar, the first webinar where we proposed an idea that actually it's completely in our hands to prepare our body, to prepare our immune system, to make it strong, resilient when we meet a virus. And coMra-therapy it's a great tool that everyone can use. So, and that sort of began our journey into this new area for us, because I myself never worked in the area of immunology or infectious diseases, so it was new for me, and that's how we began. So now, a year later, we have learned so much more. So today, actually, I would like to share with you our practical experience, because we've been getting personal reports from coMra users from around the world who used coMra devices to treat COVID. But also Dr. Anna, she was working here in Russia to treat her clients, her patients. So we're getting experience locally here. And then finally, sort of as a cherry on top, I myself and Dr. Anna, we had COVID. So we went through it with coMra in hand, and now a year later we'd like to share an update. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, apart from the clinical experience we were getting, we also very closely followed scientific literature on COVID-19. There is so much literature has been published actually every day during 2020, and that's actually, I looked it up. There is 300 scientific papers were published every day on the topic of COVID-19. But to our complete surprise, there was practically zero discussion on the methods of supporting the immune system before infection, during an infection, and then after the disease in terms of recovery. There was pretty much no discussion of this topic whatsoever. It was mostly about transmission of the virus, pathology of the disease, and then tackling the most severe cases. So that was mostly the focus. And obviously later on there was discussion about the vaccines, but there was almost nothing about what a person can do to tackle this condition himself or herself. Now, in Russian literature, it was actually a very curious thing. I found much more literature on this topic, and in fact, in September 2020, the Russian Ministry of Health has officially recommended laser therapy for treatment and rehabilitation after COVID. So there was quite a difference in English and Russian-speaking scientific literature. But we also thought that there is a huge gap, not in terms of only proposing, let's say, coMra-therapy for treatment, but actually a gap in understanding what's the core issue, the immunopathology, what's going on actually. And together with Dr. Anna Klassen and scientists from Moscow University, Oksana Giesinger, she's a professor of immunology, we wrote a paper. You can see it on the screen, and we published in the Journal of Photochemistry and Photobiology. It's one of the leading journals on the subject. And during the last 3 months, it remains one of the most downloaded paper in the journal. Actually, and also received a lot of feedback from other scientists who wrote to me personally, expressing, how unusual view we took, and actually it makes sense. So in this presentation, we'll talk not so much about the technical details as we presented in the paper, but more the implications for you and I, our friends and families, implications of our research, and also combine it with what we have learned so far during the past year of working with coMra-therapy and specifically COVID. And we'll do so in 3 steps. First of all, we'll talk about how to proactively prevent respiratory infections like COVID-19, how to treat infection if you got it, and finally, we'll talk about recovery and rehabilitation after COVID-19. Now, please note that in this presentation, we will focus on what an average person can do in terms of treatment options. We will not go into situations of severely ill people who are in hospital and they are treated by specialists in critical care. So obviously we're not going to talk about those treatment options. We'll cover what we can do, practically speaking. And as a last note, what we will talk about here in terms of COVID-19 absolutely equally applies to practically any respiratory infection, be it regular cold, be it seasonal flu. Actually, the treatment guidance and the more or less general clinical situation will be the same when it comes to coMra-therapy. And I'll explain why it is so. But before we'll get to the practical considerations, let's take a step back for a moment and let's talk about the essence of COVID-19 challenge. And by essence, I mean not the medical issues, not the technological issues, but the way how we approach healing and life challenges in general. Now, one approach, and it's actually the most common approach, when something happens, something challenging, we dislike it and we want to resist this challenge. We complain about it or we try to escape, hoping that the challenge will go away eventually. Now, if challenge doesn't go away, then we'll try to fight against it. We're trying to control and manipulate the circumstances in our life, meaning we doesn't want to change. We want to fix the thing that happened to us. So this is what I would call resisting a challenge. Now, let me take this sort of general approach and make a parallel with how we're tackling this COVID-19 challenge. Because in the beginning of the pandemic, the narrative was that the only option available to you and I was to avoid getting infected at all costs. Total lockdowns. That's it. We just, we try to escape it for as long as possible. Then, obviously it didn't work because the virus started to spread from country to country. The next sort of solution came up, which is let's try to come up with a vaccine and eradicate it. Vaccines start to coming up and then new challenges start to appear after that. So I'm looking at all the situation and what it reminds me is that when we don't understand the real issue. The actual challenge is actually missing from the picture, and we're trying to avoid the challenge, we resist it, and what happens is that we pile one problem on top of the other, on top of the other. What I'm talking about is, for example, lockdowns. The negative consequence is the huge economic hardships. Another situation, let's say if you get a disease and all you can do is to go to the hospital and allow doctors to treat you. Makes sense on the face value. But because so many people got sick, we see overwhelmed medical system. In some places, actually, it was a collapse of healthcare system. Now, with the vaccines, there are very valid concerns about safety of the vaccines. So, how do we approach these ones? Because the vaccines are very different. They were developed in a very short amount of time. Now, on top of that, we have a mutating virus. So if you watch the news, there is always a new variant, a new mutant that would appear, and we don't know will these vaccines work or not. So what I'm saying, there is something else is missing. So since COVID is not going away anytime soon, and we're really getting tired of waiting for somebody to us to fix this problem, we might just as well start trusting our own intelligence to learn about this challenge. And if we can find with that most incredible intelligence, which is called the immune system, maybe perhaps we can find the solution, which is actually we're trying to find the solution we're seeking for. So what do I mean by intelligently cooperating rather than trying to escape the challenge? Well, let's see. I hope throughout this whole presentation, you will see how I approach this. The first step, when we have a challenge, immediately fear comes up. Obviously, we don't know what it is. It's a new virus. It's unknown. There are no drugs, no medication. On the news is fear, 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 fear. So how do I approach it? Well, obviously, I need to do something on the emotional level, on the mental level. I need something to do on my physiological level. And I have to do something around myself, my family, my friends, the society around me. So it means that I'll need to work in terms of a holistic health. So I need to approach this as a challenge on all the multiple levels if I want to actually meet this challenge rather than trying to escape it. And this is what I called proactive prevention. So there's a difference. Either I would be sitting at home doing nothing and just, nothing, and just waiting, let's say, for somebody to come and, give me a vaccine shot, or I would be actively taking steps, getting myself ready, if I'll get infected, to meet this challenge. So this is what I call a proactive prevention. So let's talk about proactive prevention and how one can actually build up health of the whole person. Again, this conversation I found largely missing from the scientific literature. I couldn't say there is much on the TV, or at least here in Russia. There was some forward-looking doctors who were talking about this, but still they were kind of avoiding the whole issue. What does it mean to build up health of the whole person? So to understand this, let's again look at the couple facts. The first fact is very obvious, and we know this by now without a shadow of a doubt, is that most people have only mild or no symptoms at all after they get infected, because our immune system obviously is fully capable of tackling this new coronavirus. Because if it would be only just the virus itself, if you got infected and you would, 100% in 100%, and you would die from it, well, obviously it means, the virus is so, it creates such a strong load on our body that the body eventually fails. But that's not the case. The vast majority have only mild or completely asymptomatic. On the other hand, we also know that there is a group of people who are at risk. We're talking about people with chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, other chronic conditions as well. But now, what these diseases have anything to do with our immune system? It's a completely valid and a very, very revealing question. So what we are saying is not a coincidence, but there is a direct correspondence between chronic diseases, stress, and our ability to tackle an infection. And I will give you a hint. We need to talk about energy. What do I mean by energy? Remember when last time you had a cold, a flu? From the very first hours of the disease, we feel tired. We want to go in bed, and we actually feel so tired. We want to rest most of the time. The same happens with COVID. This overpowering fatigue is a hallmark, actually, of COVID. And pretty much everybody who had COVID, including myself, when the symptoms start to manifest, we feel fatigue. Okay, so I feel low on energy. What does it mean actually in terms of the workings of my immune system? And what it has to do with diabetes, for example. Okay, I'm tired, low on energy. But what it's got to do with my pancreas, for example, or hypertension? If we stay only at the level of the symptoms or the level of the the mechanism of the disease, we will never get to the bottom line, which is a common denominator for the state of our body, which is bioenergetics. It means that we need to look at the functional reserves of our body, meaning how strong is our body in terms of energy. So let me show you a picture from our article, a diagram. It's a bit technical diagram, but I'll try to explain it so you can understand what I mean by this. So on the horizontal axis over here, we have number of days since infection. So day 0 over here would be the day when I got infected. And here we have 25 days, the course of the disease. And this is the case of someone who had asymptomatic or mild case. I'll use my own example to illustrate the key points. On the vertical axis, we have over here total energy expenditure. This is how much energy we produce. You can see that, 14,000 kilojoules per day. Obviously, it's average numbers. From person to person, it differs. So, when I wake up in the morning, I do nothing. I just lay in bed. I already spend 6,000 kilojoules. That's what we call basal metabolic rate. It's to keep my heart pumping, my lungs working, my brain is working, and so on. It's just sort of the housekeeping of my body. The next 2,000 kilojoules is spent on inactive, dormant, so to speak, immune system. This is the housekeeping of our immune cells. So you can see it's about 20% of our total energy budget is spent on the inactive immune system. And then the rest over here this is my reserve. In other words, when I need it, I can use it. I can spend that energy. For example, if I want to run, 5K race, I would use up that energy. That's my functional reserve. So what happens when I got infected? So I felt symptoms appear on day 5. That's so-called incubation period. When I got the virus, it started multiplying in my system. And what you see here in the red color is my innate immunity kicks in. In other words, it doesn't know exactly what kind of virus it is, except that it's a pathogen and I need to suppress it. And one of the most common ways is I had a slight fever of 37.5 on my 5th day in the evening. So my innate immunity kicks in because fever is one of the ways how innate immunity works. Now, I had my coMra with me, and as soon as I felt, okay, something is going on that day, I started doing the treatments. Now, in my particular case, I was down in bed up until day 7. It's about over here. So I had headache, fatigue, and about 37 degrees for the next day and for the next night. That's all. So at this moment, my adaptive immunity kicks in. It consumes much more energy because now the immune cells, the lymphocytes, they recognize this new virus. They have this particular key that feeds that particular virus. And now within hours, my adaptive immunity produces an explosive amount of new lymphocytes that are very specific to this virus. So in blue color over here, you see extra energy consumption for my adaptive immunity. And that's how I want it. And then once the lymphocytes did their job, they start to eliminate virus from my system. And then a few days after, the energy expenditure on immune function start to decrease back to the background level. And in my particular case, apologies. Okay, and in my particular case, I got better. So 2 days I spent in bed with coMra. By day 3, I actually got back to work. I started working on my computer, even though I felt tired and I couldn't work for long hours. But 2 weeks later, so about day 15, 16, I could do my regular physical exercises. Well, in particular, I practice yoga a couple times a week, and I was able to do my regular routine. So I would say, my disease in total took, to recover about 90-95%, 2 weeks, and then full recovery took me 3 weeks, because 3 weeks later, I couldn't feel anything. So this is the case when my functional reserve, or this amount of energy, was sufficient. See, and that's the key point. I had enough functional reserves in my body to rally, to provide that energy for my immune system when it needed. Now let's look at the next case. This is someone who had a severe or critical disease. What's different? Well, first of all, over here, only this much 4,000 kilojoules is spent on body support. What does it mean? It means that this is a person who has, let's say, chronic infection, or they have diabetes. Because when you have diabetes, your energy metabolism doesn't work properly because the glucose is not absorbed into a cell. So when energy is required, I'm talking about immune cell, when immune cell requires extra energy, it cannot sort of absorb it because of the glucose imbalance, insulin imbalance within the system. It could be due to other chronic conditions. So what we can see is that this person has low basal metabolic rate. There is obviously some amount of immune cells in the body, up to 6,000, but the functional reserve is very small, only 2,000 kilojoules. Again, this is average numbers. There are huge difference from person to person. Now, what happens when this person gets coronavirus? From day 1 till day 5, it's more or less the same, meaning innate immunity kicks in. We may develop fever, temperature, fatigue, cough, and so on. But around this point over here, what happens? When adaptive immunity is supposed to kick in and those immune cells need to multiply, there is no extra energy left. And what happens when scientists try to compare somebody who has critical disease to somebody who had a mild disease, they found out that the T cells, this is our immune cells, they show signs of exhaustion, like literally functional exhaustion. These cells cannot do their job properly. During the next 2 to 3 days, these immune cells start to die off in huge numbers. This is called lymphopenia. And when the number of immune cells, hit critical levels, very low levels, and that's when the problem begins. Because around here, at this point, when immune cells no longer containing spread of the virus, it becomes uncontrolled. And what happens is that at this point happens hyperactivity of the innate immune system. That's when we get inflammation. As a result, a person may develop acute respiratory distress syndrome. If that is also not contained, then follows other systems start to fail. So this red color shows this inflammation, but it happens only because the adaptive part couldn't handle the virus. Or to be exact, it didn't have enough energy to handle the virus. And that's the key point, because when scientists analyzed the timeline, the whole timeline, it turns out they could predict severe outcomes, which is death, for example. They could predict 10 days in advance with 90% accuracy. It means something happens over here at this critical time window so that the person later on develop a critical state and possibly die. So this is what we put forward in our article. We describe this whole situation as a one whole, meaning if a person has a chronic infection, if a person has diabetes, a cardiovascular disease, all of these conditions would dramatically reduce the functional reserve, or that energy buffer here. The energy buffer available for the immune system to function properly. And here lies the opportunity, because we can increase this functional reserve using very basic tools by adjusting our lifestyle and using coMra. And that's our proposal that we put forward in the scientific paper. That's what we did with our clients, with our friends or family members. That's what I did myself. And I can only say that actually works. So, what to do, practically speaking? That was the sort of the scientific explanation. What to do in terms of, practical steps. First of all, what we need to do is to tackle fear. Because if our perceptions, if our judgment is completely clouded by this constant fear, I mean, I don't even turn on TV these days at all, we will not be able to make any practical, useful steps. So how do we tackle fear? First of all, let's acknowledge it. Okay, we do have it. Next step, we ask questions. We can go, ask ourselves. We can ask our friends. In my case, because I was really curious, like what's going on, I started digging into scientific literature, and it turned out into a whole big scientific paper. So we seek for clarity, what's actually going on. Once we establish the clarity, okay, I'm clear, that's the picture. Then we need to take action. And again, it's not a one step, it's a one step after another, after another, after another. Only this way we can prevent the fear from completely overpowering us, is by taking one little step after another, one little step after another. And I hope that in this presentation we'll show more of these practical steps that anyone can do. That's actually what we have done. So, tackle the fear, the first step. Next, plenty of sun. When vitamin D is on our immune system, it's very beneficial for our body. And the best way how to do it is to walk outside, because you will get physical exercise, mild to moderate intensity, you get plenty of fresh air, and you get plenty of sun. So how would I would describe it? Walks outside. Now, me personally, I like yoga, so I did yoga twice per week. I know my friends, they do Tai Chi. You can do it on a Zoom class, practically for free. So there is no real excuse not to do these very basic things. Next step. Okay, we have very good exercise. We walked outside, but also we need the other side of the equation, which is quality rest. And remember that our body builds up the strength. It heals itself when we have a good sleep. So remember, good sleep is a necessary part of the equation. Plenty of good sleep. Meditate during the day, if you do meditation. And also all kinds of procedure of self-care. Because when you relax, when you have this peaceful state of mind, that's when the healing happens. This is when the body starts to accumulate those functional reserves. So, quality rest. Next, balanced diet. What I mean by this, well, for every person, it would be a different diet, what they mean by balanced. In every geography, there will be slight variations and so on. But remember that when immune system kicks in, our body fights for survival. It uses a lot of proteins. So make sure in advance build up that little buffer of proteins in your body, but also be mindful about micronutrients. Also, there are very good herbs that you can take preventatively for immune system, and different supplements. Obviously, I'm talking about whole foods, I'm talking about natural diet, and avoid processed food, processed product as much as possible. And finally, we do need to be a part of the group. So if you don't know what to do in this situation, you feel like fear is really like overpowering, reach out for support, ask questions. If you feel you know something, then share, provide support. And that's how we build this social support within our small groups, be it family, group of friends, group of neighbors. Because when things get tough, this is who we reach out for, to our friends, family. And finally, let's talk about coMra-therapy. coMra-therapy, for those who maybe don't know, this is a technology, a non-invasive physiotherapy that uses 4 different radiances: near-infrared laser, magnetic field, ultrasound, and color LED. So all 4 technologies combined in one device. So that's what we introduced in Radiant Life Technologies. Now, coMra-therapy works again different from medication. And again, I'll just highlight this point again, is that if you think about medication, let's say, a particular drug that influences, workings of our immune system, all it can do is pretty much to speed up a particular process in our immune system or slow it down. That's all. That's what immunomodulators do. They either try to intensify some process or suppress this process. Obviously, this could be dangerous. So this is why only doctors would prescribe it, and there are danger of having side effects. Now, coMra-therapy works differently. It cooperates with this intelligence of our body, and in particular of our immune system. It provides that with the coherent energy, it provides that resources for the immune cell to do the job it's supposed to be doing. This is why we can safely apply coMra-therapy to treat COVID-19, flu, colds, or pretty much any infectious disease. Because remember, it's the immune system that does the job of tackling the infection. With coMra-therapy, we only support it. Now, we create the necessary condition within a cell. This is why it's so effective. This is why it's so versatile. And try it yourself. So, with coMra, we designed with Dr. Rana several programs. We called it immune support. So in the article which we wrote in March 2020, we introduced these prevention programs. So they're still the same. What we introduced initially, we learned that actually they hold true. So for someone who is under 50 years old, there is no other issues, other chronic diseases, then what you can do is universal 2 and universal 3. And you do it once daily for 12 days. And when I say universal 2 or 3, I'm referring to the programs, treatment programs that you can find in coMra-therapy user guide. So in the user guide, you will find a diagram with the points where you would place the coMra device. See, on the photograph, you see a coMra Palm device in this case. There's also a coMra Delta, a bigger device. So it's very easy to do, and you can take this device with you wherever you go and do the treatment. So universal 2 and universal 3. Very simple, easy to do treatments. Now, in my case, I wasn't doing the full program of the of universal 2 and universal 3. What happened is that starting from the autumn, I was doing a lot of training, and I was just getting my body fit to do yoga. So I did a lot of universal 3 treatments, and sometimes only universal 2, but most it was universal 3, and also treating my muscular system. But I felt I was getting more and more and more fit. That was completely sufficient. Now, when someone has a chronic disease, older than 50 years old, and there is a high risk of infection, well, in this case, you would need to do something extra. So here we list universal 2, 3, and 4. Again, is listed in the user guide. And you would do these treatments for 12 days every day. Then you take a 2-week break and then repeat the program. And you continue this 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for 3 months. And then you take a break for 3 months. Why extra treatments? That's because the body carries extra load. So for example, a chronic infection, a background chronic infection consumes about 10% of your daily metabolic rate. Any chronic infection. And if you have another condition, let's say arthritis, or you have hypertension, that's another 10-15%. So that creates more load for the system. So that's why you need more of coMra to compensate for these chronic diseases. Now, obviously, if you have your chronic disease and it frequently worsening, then you would do the treatment for the main disease. If you have diabetes, then you open the user guide, you go to the section endocrine diseases, and you do the treatment for diabetes. So I'm listing here universal 2, 3, and 4, in addition to the treatment for your main chronic disease. Now, okay, how do I know I'm actually progressing in building up my reserves? How would I measure it? Well, the first signs that you're actually getting very good way ahead is you have a deep, restful sleep. Usually this is a very good sign that while you're asleep, you wake up completely rested. It means your body is recovering really well. Also, after you do some intense physical exercises, you recover much faster than you used to. Let's say, you walked up, 5 flights of stairs and your heart is beating. If you're so tired, you need to sit down. Okay, so your functional reserve is very low. As you build up that reserve, you recover much faster. Also, pay attention to your emotional states. Usually, good functional reserve means you have a good mood, you have enthusiastic moods, and you're not so much irritable. When you become very irritable, it's usually a sign of something is going off within your system. So by just paying attention to your state of being from day to day, and you track it over the time, you can actually easily see. You can easily see how your health is actually increasing. And I could say for sure, when I combined my yoga, when I did coMra treatments, I would say especially from August till December, I could feel how my energy is going up and up and up and up. So I was really gaining in strength. Okay, so that's the coMra prevention program. Let's move to the next step. Treatments for COVID-19, flu, and colds. Now, I would like to highlight 2 very important points with regards to coMra-therapy. Please remember that it's important those first hours and first days. You maybe not necessarily have yet the sort of symptoms in full flight. You just start to feel unwell. You start sort of unusually tired. It means your body is already beginning to fight an infection. So it's better to start coMra as soon as possible. If you feel sore throat, you have like a dry cough, okay, don't wait for PCR test to come back positive. It says COVID-19. There is no need for that, because when it comes to coMra, it doesn't matter. It could be a flu, it could be a simple cold, it could be COVID-19. It doesn't matter. The approach would be the sample. The approach would be the same, which is universal 3. This is a very important treatment when you treat your main arteries in your body. And you do it much more frequently. We would suggest with Dr. Anna every 3 to 4 hours during the day. I mean, how would I know how much do I need to treat? Actually, you feel it. When you do universal 3, or at least myself, when I do universal 3, I immediately, maybe 10-15 minutes later, I can feel how my state of being is actually being uplifted. My headache is disappearing, I feel stronger. And then, several hours later, I feel, okay, I'm again starting to feel down. So it means my body needs support. I do it another universal 3. Also, you will do universal 2, and then you treat locally. Meaning, if you have a headache, it's universal 3. If you have a sore throat, open the user guide. If you have cough, you feel you have beginnings of something going on in your lungs. You don't know, maybe it's pneumonia, maybe it's just the beginning of pneumonia. You don't have to wait until you have a CT. You can already start doing pulmonology 1-2 times a day, and so on. Just open the user guide and do the local treatments. It's very easy. Now, continue these treatments until your condition significantly improves. So we want to support the body while it's fighting with the infection. Don't stop too early. Just do it until you feel much better. Then you take a break and repeat the program and so on. So we have a number of patients and clients here in Russia who followed this program, and we can say for sure that coMra-therapy supports the body and reduces the severity of the disease. Remember, with coMra, we cannot prevent the virus of getting into the system. No. The virus still gets in your system, but the difference is that with coMra-therapy, your immune system is fully prepared to tackle the virus, and then the disease duration is much shorter. There is no extra inflammation in your lungs, in your other organs and systems, and then the severity of the symptoms is much more mild. So I'd like to share one example we have here locally. This is a patient of Dr. Anna. This is a female. She is 48 years old, and she has a 3 years of history of secondary immunodeficiency due to chronic infection. So she was ill on and off all of this time, all of these 3 years. So it means that her immune system is already exhausted even before she got COVID-19. So what she did, she purchased a coMra Delta device with 905 nanometer medical terminal. That's what we call Delta Pro, or the strong device. And because of her health history, Dr. Anna recommended doing a bit of extra treatments. Remember? Extra treatments. So she did autoimmune 1 for the full course. She was about 3 weeks. And that was 3 weeks before she got, she contracted coronavirus. Now, her course of the disease was somewhat worse than mine. So for about 5 days, she had temperature shooting up to 38, 38 and a half. And she was, having all the typical symptoms of COVID, but she didn't use the medication. Whenever she felt her symptoms actually worsening, she would use the Delta. So that was for 5 days. After 5 days, she noticed her temperature start to normalize, maybe going up only in the evenings. By day 8, she had normal temperature during the day and during the night. She felt almost normal. By day 13, she was able to return to work. Now, she did work short hours in the office because she felt tired in the afternoon. Again, the fatigue lasted much longer than the actual disease. She did notice what they called long COVID. She had symptoms. She felt irritable. She couldn't sleep too well. She was waking up very often. And that continued for another week. And then by the end of the month, so it was full 4 weeks, she said, I'm actually fully recovered. So this is a case who initially, already before COVID, had exhausted immune system because of the 3 years. Remember, 3 years she already was fighting with some other infection. But now with coMra, she did a very good preventative course. Remember, it's much better if you build up your health in advance, because your immune system can kick in earlier and tackle the infection rather than dealing with the consequences of the inflammatory process during the disease. So this is a very good case, and I can say there are many, many more patients who have followed more or less the same timeline. Now, we also had a few friends, relatives who got into the hospital. They got into the COVID hospital, and they didn't want to use coMra in the beginning, when they wanted for whatever reason, but sort of eventually they got into the hospital, so what to do? So we wrote this short treatment program. We called it Immune Support 4 for common colds, flu, COVID while in hospital. What we mean by this is that if you can manage to take a coMra device with you, you'll be staying in hospitals shorter, your symptoms will be less, and your doctors will prescribe less medication. So if you can manage to do treatment while in hospital, the minimum we suggest is you do universal 3 twice per day and pulmonology. That's the points on your lungs to avoid the pneumonia. Now that's the minimum program. If you can do it, fantastic. Your stay will be much shorter. Remember, we're talking about here this area. We want the innate immunity to kick in as little as possible, because we want our adaptive immunity rather to fight the virus selectively rather than have other type of immune cells that just go completely and they sort of wipe out everything in the way. So we want to reduce this hyperinflammation. Now, what happens when we recover after COVID? I certainly could feel that there is sort of a tail of symptoms. For me, it was a week and a half. What I mean by this, I felt unusually tired. I couldn't do my usual exercises. I felt tired. I know that Anna, she had difficulty to focus in terms of, like, for example, focusing on the mental work, doing some computer work. People have difficulty with sleep. It could be a very long loss of taste, of smell. There could be palpitations, depressive symptoms, very different neurological symptoms. So the so-called long COVID became very important, and coMra-therapy, remember, can provide a huge support in this area as well. Well, first of all, with a long COVID, with recovery after any disease, and COVID-19 in particular, we need to provide a systemic support. That's the goal number one. So we do universal 3. We do universal 5. Universal 5, that's when you treat your nervous system and endocrine system. Also, what Dr. Anna is now recommending, and she finds really helpful, is you add points on your thyroid gland. That's very important. But also you add local treatments where the symptoms persist. What it means, for example, for about a week, I couldn't smell anything, so I would do my treatment with Delta. Then it came back, but still, sort of unpleasant. If you have, let's say, hearing problems, tinnitus, then you would put Delta, on your ear. Again, open the coMra-therapy user guide. All the treatments are there. Just do the local treatments. If you have this long COVID. Okay. Another point I wanted to mention here. Remember that symptoms may fluctuate. It means, like, one day you feel fantastic, you want to run out and go for a hike, but then you go for a hike and then you come back home and you crash. So don't rush. Take your time. The body needs care, support. Take it gentle. It may take a while for our body to recover. Okay, so what are the key messages, what we actually learned during the past year with COVID, but also working with many clients, with patients here in Russia and from around the world? I feel the main important question is we need to learn how to cooperate intelligently with life. It means we don't try to avoid, escape, hide, or force, the challenge to go away. No, we actually apply our intelligence. We start to find out step by step what's the nature of this challenge. Once we have a measure of clarity, okay, I need to work on my health. Then I need to cooperate with my body. I need to cooperate with my friends, with my relatives, in order to start this process of building up. And that's really the key message, I feel. Because, COVID-19, they say it's a pandemic. True, it is pandemic. But what's actually reflecting? Because remember, the vast majority of people have it asymptomatic or mild form of the disease. What COVID-19 has highlighted is what some scientists call syndemia, meaning there is pandemia of diabetes, there is pandemia of hypertension, there is pandemia cardiovascular, all of these conditions. So at the end of the day, what COVID-19 is actually highlighting is that even if you take a vaccine, even if it is a good vaccine, it will not take away your chronic diseases. And next season comes, there will be possibly another virus. Maybe it's a version of the coronavirus or a version of other adenovirus, for example. So there are no silver bullets, so to speak, to make the problem go away. No, it's so much better when we cooperate with life, we learn, and we become stronger. And that's how we unfold our potential. The next message, I feel it's so important in this day and time. It's important to invest in our health and in our self-sufficiency. We said it a year ago. We repeated this message almost through every webinar during all the lockdown period, when our friends couldn't get to the hospitals because the hospitals are completely overwhelmed, when our relatives are staying at home. And I would call my aunt and I would say, look, I have a Delta. Do you need help? So I could help myself, I could help my family, I could help our clients who are facing this situation when they have to rely on themselves. So it's much better to invest in yourself, because with every investment, there is a benefit coming back. Next key message, remember, do coMra before, during, and after a respiratory infection. We did have several patients, clients who were very reluctant. To my surprise, there was one particular case. She's a doctor, she works in a hospital, but I can only imagine what kind of pressure they go through, because every day she worked in a COVID hospital, she would go back to the hospital and she would face that situation. So it's very depressing. It's very hugely disheartening when you see this happening every day. So she was doing coMra, but sort of half-heartedly, only once per day. And she had a longer course of COVID when she got it. So, pay attention to your body. Really pay attention. Build up those functional reserves. And remember, and this is sort of the most fun part, is that we're never alone. We're never truly alone, because on our side is the most advanced immune intelligence. It's on our side. Because if you think of it, it takes only literally a couple of days, 2-3 days for our immune system to come up with a solution for a new virus. And it takes a lot of time for a scientific community. Typically it's years to come up with, a particular medication for that virus, for that bacteria. But for our immune system, it takes only hours, maybe days at most. So on our side, we have this enormous intelligence, which we can cooperate with if we use our own intelligence, if we don't deny the intelligence that we have Everybody has it. You don't have to have a PhD in medicine, in immunology. It's really basic common sense stuff. And it works, the best part. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I'll switch off my screen. And if you have comments, if you have questions, let's discuss this. You can type in the chat. You can just unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Arzan. It's a lot to absorb, but it's great. Thank you. Well done.
Pleasure.
First of all, I want to thank you for a most inspirational webinar. That was absolutely fantastic. The second is I liked your very broad brush approach, especially when it came to looking at different aspects of health, not just the physical health, which was wonderful. And from that point of view, I wondered if I could share something that I've been following as well, if that's appropriate.
Oh, absolutely.
I've been using my coMra on a regular basis, you know, the protocols that you've suggested. Fortunately, I haven't really come down with COVID, which has been very good, but I've been using it preventatively. And from the mental and emotional health point of view, I've been looking at a website, but she has free MP3 downloads on there. And I've used 3 in particular as part of my daily meditation, which was fantastic. Each of these is no longer than about 20 minutes, and they're absolutely wonderful, in addition to coMra treatment. So I thought I'd share that.
Lovely. Lovely. Thank you. Meditation is a fantastic tool. Indeed.
Arjan, thank you for the presentation. I like it very much. One question came up for me because my parents will probably get a vaccine. So I thought that maybe it's good to advise them to something like prevention against possible complication of the vaccines, something like universal free. What do you think, like before getting a shot?
Yes, with vaccines, and it doesn't matter actually which version of vaccine. The funny thing is that even when you take a shot, even if you take a shot, your immune system still has to do the job of producing the antibodies. There is still some sort of an immune reaction. So even the usual vaccines, it is recommended that you prepare your body if you decide to take a vaccine. So, Milen, I would go for a full preventative treatment program.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
I just want to know what the difference is between the two. There's a handheld one, and it doesn't have the. What's the difference? Because there's ultrasound, I think, on the one, not on the other.
Correct.
And do you need to use the ultrasound for all those therapies that you were talking about?
The difference is within with the ultrasound. So the smaller device called Palm doesn't have the ultrasound. The Delta device have ultrasound, and there is also different versions of the laser. But when it comes to the immune system, if we talk about just infection, for example, Palm does a fantastic job because Palm works mostly through the liquid part, through the lymph, through the blood, and all the radiances are absorbed by the liquid part. So this is why Palm is such a great tool to support the workings of our immune system. When specifically, if you have, let's say, a chronic pre-existing condition, let's say, hypertension, you need to work on that. Also, if it happens that your COVID takes more sort of more severe turn, and you have inflammation, and then you need to recover. Let's say your lungs, you had pneumonia, and you had inflammation in your lungs. There are scars. So ultrasound speeds up regeneration of the tissue. It provides that little mechanical micro massage to speed up the regenerative process.
Okay, so it's basically the same, the palm is the same as the other one, other than the ultrasound?
Ultrasound and the two different versions of the laser. Palm has what we call a softer version, 980 nanometer. Delta comes with 905, which is more sort of stronger, more intense coMra effect, but also comes with 980. But for this difference, if you like considering which one should I get, shouldn't I get, I would suggest get in touch with Maxim. I'm sure he's over here somewhere. He's on our support on the website, and have a chat with him, because every situation is different and individual. Usually it's better to have a chat to and get the full picture of what are your needs in terms of health.
How could I get a hold of, is it Max?
He's here.
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Hi. Okay. Is there a way I can contact you after the...
Yeah, the simple way is to go in the chat on any of websites. There is a small green button in the corner. But on that matter, in terms of Palm, I wanted to, Arjan, if I can, a small story just from this weekend. As we were preparing for presentation, Friday night, having call from my relative's cousin, actually, is having a COVID. And I knew this, that he is having a high temperature for, let's say, several days. And he is having now it confirmed with a test on Friday. And I'm calling him, and I understand he's in a quite weak condition. He is already 5 days, 39 temperature, which is quite high. Difficult part comes when after 5 days of 39, you start having 40 or 41. And this is the way it gets, really bad, this situation. And I am understanding a kind of this is like critical day. I'm trying to arrange something for him to have coMra palm from my mother next day. Saturday morning, he started to treat himself with coMra palm. But my mother told him, do universal 3 for not 1 minute per point, but 2 minutes per point, which means like 20 minutes altogether, and do it every 2 hours. And I told, okay, if you told him like to do it like this, let it be like, because for me, for my understanding, it is very intensive treatment, like every 2 hours, 20 minutes. So he did it like Saturday, Sunday. Sunday, he was already better. Monday, much better. And today we had the conversation. He is already like 36 point something in terms of temperature. So he's out of it in those 3 days. So this is in terms of coMra palm.
It's a small device, but it is very powerful. It's very powerful. So when the body is really sort of in difficult times, it can provide fantastic support. Thank you, Maxim.
Hi, this is June. Can I just say a couple of things? Number one, as far as the palm, most of the people that I've worked with who have had COVID have the palm, not the Delta, and they've all done fairly well. No one's gone to the hospital, some very easy, some not quite so. But I want to say to this, Dr. Anna's idea of the thyroid, and I personally do my thyroid whenever I do anything. And I'm doing it like she said, and I think that is possibly one of the keys that has kept me so strong. I didn't think about it until you mentioned it. So that's really a interesting point. And I was just doing it as part of my protocol. So, yeah. Thank you. Great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen.
Hi, Arjan and everyone. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I wanted to just, on the tail of what June just said, I also add thymus to every one of my blood treatments. When I do Universal 3, I automatically do thymus. I've incorporated it from day one, and it's so automatic now that I do that. And the other thing I wanted to say was I'm so grateful that we have a presentation with scientific support for supporting the host rather than focusing on the pathogen. And I think our psyches are so overwhelmed with the pathogen. When we hear this kind of refreshing and uplifting presentation, it right away our immune systems are better. And maybe if we heard more of this and less of the news, we'd all be healthier. So I say do one of these every week and I'll tune in. And the supportive community is wonderful. I think that support in general has been very appreciated from this end. So thank you all very much. And I just wanted to add that in my little bit. And one more question regarding the Delta versus Palm. Would it be interesting to do some comparative studies for people who are using Delta and Palm in terms of what the outcomes are and in terms of the length of, downtime, effect on the immune system? I don't know. That's just, I'm throwing that out there as a possibility. I have both, and my sense would be when I'm really sick, I would pick the 905. And if I'm doing prevention, it would be more like the 980 or the Palm. So that's just my thoughts on it, but I'd appreciate if anybody's got any actual comparative study on that, would be great. And thanks again.
Thank you, Lola. Very good question. To my knowledge, no, as a side-by-side comparison, apart from the personal experience. It's simply because I have Delta at home, I tend to sort of grab it because I have it. With Palm, well, from Dr. Anna's feedback, actually, from her personally, sometimes she would prefer go for the Palm, especially when it comes to, let's say, Universal 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly easier to use and handier.
And it's easier to use, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again.
Thank you, Lola.
Arjan, just a quick thing to come back to the basal metabolic rate. And with respect to 10% on a chronic infection, my understanding is that 10% is not like 10% of 90% of a day, but 10% of the overall reserves, which is basically the same as living 2 days in 1 day in terms of energy spent. Is there anything you want to add about that or corroborate or clarify?
Yes. So what I used in my paper, I used the calculations done by a team of scientists, the immunologists, and they try to quantify all the different aspects of our health in terms of impact on that overall energy budget. So they took an overall energy budget, let's say it's 100%, and then they tried to measure what's going to happen to that budget. Now, if we have, let's say, acute stress, and surprisingly, the numbers at first when I read it was like really surprising to me. For example, acute fear, acute emotional stress may take up to 30% of that total budget. This is enormous, enormous, enormous number. So when I hear reports of, a young person, a young doctor, she works in a COVID hospital and she got like really sick even though she's 25 years old. And think, okay, but what about emotional stress? If it's really 30% is taken away by that seeing people every day, in the hospital, being in that environment is a huge stress. So emotional stress, if you experience pain, your usual pain, but because of the pain you cannot sleep fully, also you have severe disturbance of sleep. So that can also multiply up to 30% when you chronically lack in having a good sleep. It seems, minor thing, but has an enormous effect on your energy budget. The same thing goes for the chronic infection. The same thing goes for other conditions, like, for example, cancer, because these are slowly creating sort of load on our immune system. I have all the references and actually the table with individual numbers in the paper guard. Somebody's curious to see. But what it opened my eyes when I look at those numbers is that actually we cannot separate our health in terms of small boxes. Okay, so this is a diabetes, got nothing to do with my arthritis. And this is my stress at work. It got nothing to do with my autoimmune condition. No, but life doesn't work in separate boxes. We have only one whole system, which is completely interrelated. And if we are deficient on sort of one side, then the other aspects start to suffer as well. They go down as well. So when we recover, when we heal, we need to do it the same way, meaning holistically. And that's what I like so much. That team of scientists is that they actually measured energy expenditure on those extra sort of expenses.
That's great. Thank you, Arjan. Great presentation. Yeah, loved it.
Thank you, Gerd.
I just wanted to say that it is so wonderful to be part of this community. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. Great to have you with us.
Garrett just wanted to mention to you quickly about maybe you have read the paper I have sent one day to Arjan. They did in Europe a quantifying research on 10,000 patients, and they basically confirmed in this latest study what we knew for a long time about this Garkavi ratio, so to speak, where lymphocytes count is all lymphocytes ratio is all very predictive, let's say, ratio in terms of outcome. So they did a 10,000 patient study, so quite big one.
Yes, the study I was referring to in terms of the predictive model, they took in China all of the national data, which is a lot of people, from December, I think it was up to the August 2020, and they took together this whole array of data and all of their clinical data, everything, the blood analysis, everything, the duration of the disease, the severity of the disease, and so on. And they applied some very smart algorithms which try to find those parameters only which can predict in advance. And that was number one, the percentage of the lymphocytes in the total count of white blood cells. That's what we're talking about. And the second one was some other parameter that has to do with the glucose metabolism, which is obviously energy metabolism. So only using those two parameters, they build up this predictive model, and they show, look, 10 days in advance, we can already see the exhaustion of our immune system to kick in. And then within certain sort of parameters, you could easily see in advance. And that sort of get me going with, okay, what's going on 10 days before the onset of these severe symptoms? And that's when the adaptive immunity kicks in. It's exactly those 10, 12 days.
More space for someone else, but I'm just thinking, I remember a video that you and Garrett presented 2014, 15, 16 in those classes at that time, and it's so impressive to me, and it was looking at a Petri table that was so big, and we watched the bacteria be killed, mutate, be killed, mutate, be killed. And I think going back to this with this virus, this is what I've been on my mind so much because it's already mutating. We already know that. I've already seen mutation in America, quite a few people. But again, you go back to what you're saying. The immune system has got to be built up because of mutations happening. The viruses and bacteria are going to mutate. They like it here.
That's
So it's
how
up
they
to,
evolved for
yeah,
billions of years. They
exactly.
mutate like every other second, maybe. They
Right,
multiply,
right,
evolve.
right,
But the same, our immune system, it also
right,
evolves on par because
right,
we sort of coexist for these millions of years.
right.
And that's the beauty of cooperating with the immunity because it's so smart.
No, but that just goes more with what you're saying. I mean, I'm just trying to think about all these things that you're talking, and I can see in my own case, because I've done coma for so many years, my immune system is very, very different.
Mm.
And that's because of coma. Just doing it over and over and over. Don't be bored, just keep doing it. Yeah, so thank you.
Actually, that's a very exciting topic for immunology. I've introduced coMra technology to a university in Moscow, and we've started to do some research. Just in the early days, it's too early to say anything concrete. But once we publish that paper, and I'm fully confident that sort of coMra now is in the mainstream, that more and more people will start paying attention. Now, again, because of the mutations, because of it's hard to control the universe. It's hard to manipulate every single variant and every single mutant. It's so hard. So when I met with those scientists, with the immunologists, and I was bringing across one very simple message, and they couldn't get it for a long time, actually. I was bringing this one simple message that the coMra device, be it Palm or Delta, it does not kill directly the virus. And they couldn't get it, but then how it works? No, your machine must kill the virus. That's sort of the thinking goes. But no. It kills nothing. It doesn't kill any virus. It doesn't kill the bacteria. It only supports life. And when we apply it to the human body, it supports the body itself. It supports the person to become more healthy, more strong. Exciting idea in terms of immunology. I agree with you, June. Come on.
Yes, Azania, I wanted to ask about antibodies and if those tests are becoming more popular, or do people just not go for them once they've had the virus?
The test for the antibodies, well, popular, not popular. Now, this is a sort of interesting question when you have coMra. Because when I had COVID and I went through it, I didn't go for the PCR test, meaning when I just got, because I knew in either case, I would do coMra in the same way. So it wouldn't make any difference to me, the knowledge itself. Do I have COVID? Do I have not COVID, a flu? So I did the treatment until, I felt better. Now, I did went for the antibody test because, for the purpose of this presentation, because I wanted to actually to make sure I had COVID, so I can relate this experience to you. Although, loss of smell and taste and other symptoms are very characteristic. So, but I was curious. That's why I went for the antibody test. But if someone went through the disease, they had all the symptoms, they used coMra, they recovered fully, I don't know. Why would you need the antibody test? Because you know that the immune system is capable.
Yeah, it's just if you don't know that you've had it, if you're asymptomatic, you don't know that you've had it. Maybe you want to start traveling.
Well, yeah. These requirements here for traveling, so on, possibly, yeah.
Thank you.
And that is the wisdom of the body versus our misguided notion that we can control the universe. As you mentioned, Arjan, with picking out one pathogen and somehow making it the enemy. But I've been personally studying a lot lately about how interrelated we are with microorganisms and how many of them we have in our system. And it's only when one goes kind of sideways or out of whack that we pay attention. And I just wanted this as a comment more than anything, that I think COVID has provided us an opportunity to look at our coexistence with microorganisms and how we are so interrelated and how we have this built-in system to deal with life in all aspects if we just take care of the host, if we take care of this body. And I think for me, this is what COVID has represented, is an opportunity to really get in touch with that deeper wisdom and intelligence that says we can't just keep fighting everything that comes our way. We have to work in cooperation and in some compassionate, loving way with ourselves rather than fight it all the time. So I think we've been handed a gift. I hope we get the wisdom from it. And again, thank you for and I don't know how to get rid of my annoying oh, it's gone now. Thank you.
I put it down.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lola. Indeed, the microbiome, sometimes they call it microbiome, is enormous. And if we look at the genetic diversity, if we calculate sort of the number of genes within our boundaries of our body, we're mostly bacteria. We're something like 90% of our body is bacterial DNA, and not human DNA at all. We're mostly a walking, talking, forest and ecosystem of bacteria and viruses that are all the time within us. And that's been with us for millions of years. We evolved to be a whole community of these viruses. And whenever a new virus, a new bacteria show up, of course, there is a certain time of sort of dancing around and getting to know each other. We establish the new relationship, the new balance, and it becomes part of our system. And that's how we evolve. So it's not so much of antagonism or fighting each other. I completely agree. Because immune system, at the end of the day, is a system of relationships. And then the relationships are established when there is this, mutual benefit established. We flourish.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
Pleasure. I often laughed when we were discussing COVID and other infections, Dr. Anna, because she would say when she worked as a doctor, I guess you would call it GP, a general practitioner, and she would see every day people come to her with all kinds of germs, and she said, I never, put masks and gloves and so on. She would always touching people, always in contact, because I want my immune system to be like as knowledgeable as possible. And through working all these years, like in direct, immediate contact with so many patients, I'm picturing her immune system is like is like a super developed intelligence which has knowledge of like every possible variant of virus and bacteria and so on. Because when she got COVID, for a whole week we wouldn't sure what she has, because her symptoms were so mild. They were bordering of feeling somewhat tired, but that was it. So my explanation, my sort of way to understand it, is that your immune system is actually highly developed through the years of working as a medical doctor, while my immune system is more like a bunch of amateurs, like meeting this new coronavirus and trying to handle it for the first time. So it's really actually exciting how immune system evolves with every contact. And sitting at home in this plastic bubble really doesn't help. Really doesn't help.
If I may just add to that, reminds me of the old, let's say, country doctor, and someone would say, what's wrong with my child when their immune system isn't working? He said, well, you don't have them out in the garden eating any dirt. You got to go out in the garden and eat some dirt, and then they'll be healthy.
It's lovely to see you all joining for a really nice, good conversation. Had lots of fun sharing with you what we found so far, getting your feedback. Thank you for joining. We'll make a YouTube recording. We'll put it on YouTube, share with your friends. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Azan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sarjan, everyone.
Wonderful.
Hope to go and eat this.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.